Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam visited Beijing and spoke with central government officials about the national security legislation for Hong Kong SAR. Why now? What messages she has delivered? And how will controversy over Hong Kong's security legislation play out? To talk about these issues and more, I'm pleased to be joined by Lawrence Ma, barrister and chairman of the Hong Kong Legal Exchange Foundation, Xiao Geng, president of the Hong Kong Institution for International Finance, Mara Cavolo, CEO of M Communications, who's also a non-resident senior fellow of the Center for China and Globalization. That is our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. Let me start with you, Lawrence. Why the visit at this time for Carrie Lam? And she kept saying that she supports the legislation of national security for Hong Kong, but how difficult is it for her to get the message out to Hong Kong people?
Well, Article 23, which is the Hong Kong basic law, gives Hong Kong the right to legislate on national security law. But we have waited for 23 years, and this Article 23 has never been passed. Now, therefore, because of the, you can see that the waves and waves of color revolution coming in into Hong Kong. You see the 2014 Occupying Central movement. You see the 2019 anti-extradition bill movement. All these black-clad riots in Hong Kong. The National People's Congress has decided to make a decision to enact the national security law for Hong Kong. Now, the problem is, when China, the mainland China, has a different legal system with Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a common law system, and whereas mainland China has a civil law system. So as a result, if any laws that's been drafted by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, the way they draft the law may not be workable or compatible with the Hong Kong common law system. So as a result, there is a need to consult at least the Secretary for Justice, and with respect to the drafting of it, and the National People's Congress Standing Committee has to consult the police with respect to the operation side of the law, and also the Security Bureau, our ministers of that bureau, to determine how the policy of any national security policy is to be implemented. So these would be the things that the national government would want to know from Hong Kong, and therefore Mrs. Carrie Lam took the trip to see the central government for these purposes.
And what do you think the messages will she be saying to the central authorities on what should be the things that we should watch out for when legislating for a law like this, apart from the apparent contradictions between the different two legal systems?
Well, I think it is how people in Hong Kong would consider or treasure their freedom of expression, the freedom of assembly, and how is the national security law going to impact on that sort of freedom? Whether there would be a line to be drawn between what can be said and what cannot be said in the future. Now, that concerns a lot of Hong Kong people. And you know, whether, for example, if they shouted the end of the communist rule, for example, whereas today is the June 4th, can that still be shouted? And that was some of the concerns of some local Hong Kong people. And I think Mrs. Carrie Lam has carried that forward to the central government. And it seems that the central government has pretty receptive to that sort of concerns and would be very careful in drafting the laws.
And Mr. Xiao, the meeting with the central government, Carrie Lam kept saying that the Hong Kong SAR government support the legislation process. Hong Kong actually bears the constitutional responsibility to safeguard national security. But why didn't Hong Kong pass the national security law on itself? And what kind of a difference will it make if it is legislated in Beijing?
Well, I think Hong Kong has a common law tradition, that's true. But the common law tradition actually is primarily to resolve disputes and violation of property rights, those issues which a commercial center, a financial center like Hong Kong has practiced very well in the past, including after 1997. And what really appeared over last year is something really unusual in Hong Kong. It's really violent, incidents, and really something which belongs to really national security. And somehow the court in Hong Kong, they are designed really for commercial purposes, not political purposes. So that's why there has been a loophole there. And I think over almost a year, in the past, central government in Beijing and also Hong Kong government and Hong Kong people really, has been frustrated with this loophole. And basically it affects the life and the safety of property, and endangers really the stability of Hong Kong as an international financial center. So I think by this time, all the people involved actually already have pretty, good understanding about the nature. So the issue now is how to really, have both advantages. The advantage of a national security law really enforces the stability, the social stability of Hong Kong, and then also the continuation of the common law tradition, which guards Hong Kong's basic life and business operations. So I think, in fact, these two are not, in conflict. It's just that by this time, all the problems has been exposed, and now we have really a solution.
And Lawrence just mentioned people worried about the law for national security is they worried that some of their rights may be affected, like freedom of expression, freedom of press, and other economic freedoms as well, probably. Do you think, Mr. Xiao, those rights of Hong Kong people will be affected in any way because of the national security law?
No, I think...
let Mr. Xiao first address this issue. Yeah. Lawrence, we'll come back to you.
I'm sorry.
I think as long as they express their opinions peacefully, there should be no problems. The issue is that if they planning to do some terrorist, violence, and also organized crime and organized attack on, the government and also the central government, those things, they, of course, any country would not allow. But if you just say, okay, I disagree with the government, I think the Communist Party is not good, that's fine. Hong Kong, is a commercial city. It's not a political battleground. For those issues.
Lawrence, what do you want to say on that?
Yes. No, I thought the question was directed to me. I forgot it now.
But in related issues, how will this law be enforced in Hong Kong? Because a lot of details are still missing. For example, who will try those offenders, and what kind of mechanism will be there, and where is the final court of judgment be? Lawrence?
Well, that is pretty controversial because, and it has actually created a lot of doubts. If you read the decision, the NPC decision, it has left open a lot of questions for to be answered. But I firmly believe that local enforcement would still take charge of enforcement of laws in Hong Kong, so the police, and also they would be enforcing the law. I don't think there would be cross-border legal law enforcement. That means there would not be cross-border agencies being sent by Beijing. But of course, this is only my speculation, because if you read the decision is pretty clear that the law would allow central government authorities, for example, the National Security Department or the Ministry, to set up offices in Hong Kong, just like the Foreign Affairs Ministry. But only setting up a structure here. But whether they would have manpower here and whether those people can go outside of their complex and enforce the law, I think this is still very uncertain. So let's have to wait. We have to wait until the law. But to answer the question before you ask me, I think whether the rights of Hong Kong people have been affected or would be severely affected, I don't think they will, because the still there. Freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and freedom of speech. They are all there in place, and there has been the basic law protecting them. And there has been a number of judicial decisions protecting those rights. So unless you are only for a very, very few people who are instrumental in subverting the country or overthrowing government, otherwise general public would not be of concern at all.
All right. We have also gathered some opinions and advices on the internet on the national security law for Hong Kong SAR. Let's check out what some of them have been saying. There are people who have been talking about the intent and also the contents. This internet user said, we need to emphasize one country, two systems, otherwise the resistance may become larger anyhow. One country is the basis of all, or else anything is meaningless. If Hong Kong no longer belonged to China, how would you talk about it? The security law is based on the level of the nation. Well, this is common sense. We talk about this, the national identity, the sense of national identity for Hong Kongers. Mario, why do you think some Hong Kong people still have trouble realizing that they are now living in China? They are a Chinese citizen, although they live in a special administrative region?
Thanks, Oye. People in Hong Kong tend to be the younger generation who have been, frankly, unduly influenced by Western ideas. And I don't mind the idea of giving someone an opportunity to say, you know, hey, I'd like to live this way, or I'd like to live that way. You know, I prefer the authoritarian civil law society. It's more stable and consistent, and it is. Or I prefer the more freewheeling, neoliberal Western democracy of America. Okay, if that's your cup of tea, okay. But the fact of the matter is that by manipulative practices, by straight up even lies about the truth about the national security law, about a lot of issues related to China that we've talked about over the last few weeks, they're being told false information. It's like a form of brainwashing and propaganda that's coming from the West, and it's exactly what they accuse China of doing, and it's what China isn't doing. So it's a frustrating and controversial situation.
And one good example of this is probably, according to some, at least Trump is saying this, China has replaced the promised formula of one country, two systems with one country, one system. Will this national security law change from two systems to one system? Mario?
The national security law will not, anyone who's taken a moment to actually read what's being intended and read what it says, knows that the national security law in no way, shape, or form is going to change the one country, two systems to Trump's accused one country, one system. It's very, very clear that that's not the case. It's the idea that the national security law for Hong Kong should pass as well. It passed for Macau, and there wasn't any big deal or big hubbub, as we might say, about that, and there shouldn't be one now. They're using it as a cudgel. They're using it as a political weapon. It's another way to attack China. To be frank with you, it's a lot of hot air. I don't believe in the end it's going to amount to much other than it's a good thing that Hong Kong has a national security law, and heck, why not? America has 12. So,
Lawrence, I want your take on this. Do you think the people in the opposition really believe this will change two systems into one system, or they understand they're trying to play up as a cudgel?
Well, I think this is really political red herrings. I mean, honestly, the basic law is there, And it is that the law actually comes into Hong Kong via Article 18 of the Basic Law. Because Article 18 of the Basic Law says that, yes, the central government can legislate for Hong Kong, but only because of Article 18, because they are not within Hong Kong's autonomy. And then it is to be annexed in Annex 3 of the Basic Law. And since the Basic Law is here, it guarantees rights. Article 27 guarantees freedom of expression. Article 39 imports the Bill of Rights Ordinance. So all the rights are there. And there's a Chapter 4 of the, I think, there's an existing court system, and you need the court to interpret the law. You need the court to enforce the law. Now, how could you not have the two systems and having the Hong Kong court to enforce the law, the national security law? This is illogical, isn't it?
Yeah. And Mr. Xiao, this has seen international ramifications. At least the U.S. threatened to change its preferable trade policies towards Hong Kong, saying Hong Kong is no longer autonomous any longer. First of all, do you think Hong Kong's trade policies should be hinged on that? And what is the right way to understand the U.S. policy here?
Well, I think Hong Kong has been a free port before 1997, and then China actually, through basic law, basically allows Hong Kong continue to be a free port. And that means that Hong Kong is like we have no trade barriers. We have no really tariffs, except a few things, But so in that sense, Hong Kong does not depend on U.S. policy to be and to continue to be a free port. And on the other hand, U.S. actually exports a lot of things to Hong Kong, And even if you, no matter what the U.S. do, Hong Kong can continue open to, to allow U.S. companies, financial institutions to make money here,
So what kind of consequences will Hong Kong see if the U.S. go through with those trade policies? What difference will it make?
Well, I think very little in terms of substance. And we can just look at whether the American companies will leave Hong Kong. They come to Hong Kong to make a profit, do investment into China. So all this noise from U.S. is basically trying to influence the political atmosphere in Hong Kong. So people who not understand the economic systems in Hong Kong, they may be worried about,
Will
so
they
there might
leave?
be some people worried. Yeah.
Will they leave?
Well, I think most of people will not leave. But if you are doing politics in Hong Kong, you probably will leave. But if you want to make money, this is still the place to invest into China. The best place in Asia.
Yeah, business people are supposed to talk about business in the first place. Well, also, Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam recently accused of foreign governments adopting double standard. For example, in how the U.S. reacts to riots there, how it reached a similar unrest in Hong Kong last year. She said they are highly concerned about their own national security, but when it comes to our national security, especially the situation in Hong Kong, they look through tinted glasses. Mario, so the Americans are not looking at the problem straight. They are thinking they are above others.
The Americans are doing what has bothered me. I moved overseas 20 years ago, so it gives me the ability to see things objectively. I'm not anti-America, pro-America, anti-China, pro-China. Just let's have good, open, clear, intelligent discussions. And one of the things I noticed over this couple of decades, and even before, is there's a false sense of moral superiority to people who love to uphold this idea of Western democracy and capitalism, that's, oh, our way is better. And if it hadn't been corrupted, maybe you could even try to make that argument, but look at how the capitalist system and political system there has been steadily corrupted over the last 20 years, and there's layers and layers of factual evidence. So I'm not being rhetorical when I say it. The system is now an oligarchy, not an open,
But how can
fair,
they with clear
capitalist
conscience
democracy.
say what your law enforcement is doing to protesters and rioters is anything different than the Hong Kong police doing to the rioters there, maybe with much more restraints?
Well, you're absolutely right. How can they do that with a clear conscience? And the answer is that they don't have a clear conscience. I firmly believe that they know that they're being manipulative, intentionally, deliberately manipulative, and that what they are doing is continuing to point out negatives elsewhere to distract people from the real problems at home, which are the fact that America has become an oligarchy, not of leaders taking care of the society, but, and you see it again and again with the bailouts, including the current pandemic bailout stimulus package. They just keep bailing out the billionaires in Wall Street first, not the citizens. And the country is not in a good place. They've lost their position as a world leader. There's just a number of systemic problems over there, and corruption. It's been going on for years. They want to keep everyone distracted from this reality, and I'm not happy to say it.
Lawrence, how do Hong Kong people look at what is going on in the U.S. In comparison, what has been going on in Hong Kong and the different perceptions by the people with different values?
Well, we looking at what happened in the United States when they are sending out National Guards and even armored cars and threatened to fire real bullets onto the protesters. We think the Americans are very hypocritical. They have double standards when it comes to violence or public order events. When it suits the American interest, they would condemn us for or having police brutality. But when they are actually, in fact, the police brutality was happening in the United States, they probably have to condone it or combat it in disregard of what they call human rights. So when it comes to human rights, it is a weapon to attack China and Hong Kong. When it comes to themselves, they become hypocritical.
Yeah, this is really kind of make no sense. But what is more confusing is that U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in response to the security legislation in Hong Kong, he said the U.S. is considering welcoming people from Hong Kong to come to America. And this is not the only place. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson also said the United Kingdom will offer millions in Hong Kong visas and possible a route to UK citizenship if China persists with its national security legislation. First of all, Mario, do you really think America will welcome Hong Kong people to its shore when they are restricting their immigration policies?
Well, again, I'm going to say no. I don't think that what they are saying they're going to do what is anything more than bluster. They may execute something, but it's going to be very thin at best. The fact of the matter is, and the Americans know this, for example, I'm in several professional WeChat groups with other foreigners who are here in China, and I mean well over thousands of people. We're all together in one voice that we don't have any interest in going back to America. So why is there some special idea that a Hong Kong person is going to actually evaluate what's really going on in America and say, well, do I really actually want to go there? Those numbers are going to be quite small, I think, actually. So this is all just more circus bluster. I'm sorry, but I don't see it in a significant way.
Well, there's obviously generated a lot of traffic on the internet about this recent proposal. Let's look at one of them. Henry Maraza, He said, "I'm willing to bet that the only Hong Kongers who would find it worthwhile to move are anti-China activists, out of more than a few dozen. Others may try and end up jobless, moneyless, homeless, racially ridiculed, only to regret leaving Hong Kong." Mr. Xiao, how many Hong Kongers are ready or are willing to leave Hong Kong to join the United Kingdom or the United States?
Well, I agree with all of you. You know, this is just a gesture. You know, trying to allow maybe just a tiny number of people who really worked with the U.S. You know, in generating all the political problems in Hong Kong. You know, they may actually find it necessary to run, you know, to U.S. or U.K. Otherwise, for most rational people, you look around the world, the opportunity is here in Hong Kong, and even cross-border in China, you know, is better than I think the UK or the US in terms of the economy. So I really doubt, you know, whether any people really interested, unless they really deeply involved with this political movement in Hong Kong.
And Lawrence, as far as I know, the reason that the United Kingdom wanted to break away from the European Union is they worried about their immigration from the rest of the world. How possible can the United Kingdom accept thousands, tens of thousands, or even millions of people from Hong Kong simply because they worried about a national security law in Hong Kong?
Now, you've got to understand that I think that it is a political gesture. I think could even end up as a pack of lies. I mean, these Western powers would only do things in their interest. For example, if they say they encourage the protesters here to protest more and then to disrupt the society and to destabilize the government, and that is to the Western powers' interest. Now, but if you come back to think about it, is it in their interest to absorb all these rioters, all these potential criminals? What is the interest? What is that for them to gain by feeding them? By actually, they probably, if they migrated to the United States or the United Kingdom, they would be on the dole. They would have to rely on Social Security because they won't be able to find a job. Now, is the American people and the American government going to feed them? So they're not. So it is simply, I think it will verge to come down to a delusion for Hong Kong people to even seriously think about it.
Mm. And finally, very briefly, Lawrence, how do you think Hong Kong will be doing this year? There's still probably a lot of roadblocks ahead. The local legislative council election, and the election year, where maybe in the U.S. will have some bearing on Hong Kong.
Well, I think most important, as in Hong Kong nowadays, is to rapidly contemplating and possibly assisting the drafting of the national security legislation, because we are in contemplation of the arrival of that law, so that if the law is workable, it would make Hong Kong a safer place and a more stable place for people to live in and conduct their business and live here. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ma. Thank you, Mr. Cavolo, and thank you, Mr. Xiao, for your insights. You've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Joe in Beijing. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.